In Genesis, Joseph says something astonishing. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Not just a survivor of betrayal, not just a dream interpreter, a father to the most powerful king on earth. What does that actually mean? Was Joseph simply a personal advisor, or did he reshape the entire way Egypt was governed? And here's the deeper question we're going to explore in this video. When we look at the archaeology and Egyptology of the early New Kingdom, of Ahmose I and his son, in the Jewish timeline, do we see a system that looks like the one Joseph created in Genesis? Because when you line up the biblical text with what archaeologists have found, a very striking picture appears. A suddenly centralized bureaucracy managing grain, land and labor. A shift from the king doing everything personally to a powerful official ruling in the king's name. Tomb inscriptions where elites no longer brag only about conquest, but about feeding the hungry, defending the weak and judging fairly. Egyptian wisdom literature that sounds uncannily like the moral world of the Bible. None of that carves the name Yosef ben Yaakov into stone. But all of it raises a serious question. Are we watching, in Egyptian form, the long shadow of Joseph's father to Pharaoh administration? In this video, we'll move through three layers. First, the text. What father to Pharaoh actually meant, and how Joseph's policies worked. Second, archaeology and Egyptology. What scholars say about the early New Kingdom under Ahmose and his son. And third, the Jewish timeline. Why so many features of that Egypt line up with the system Genesis attributes to Joseph? Not as sensational proof, but as a careful, responsible fit. Let's begin with Genesis 45, verse 8. Genesis gives us three key clusters of text. Genesis 41, Joseph elevated as vizier. Genesis 45, father to Pharaoh. Genesis 47, Joseph's reforms. Father to Pharaoh does not mean biological fatherhood. In the ancient Near East, a father is a guide, a teacher, a protector, a governing mind behind the throne. Joseph is what we would call a chief administrator or regent-like vizier. And the Torah immediately shows us what he actually did. First, centralized grain and land management. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, and the land became Pharaoh's. Second, rule-based taxation. Joseph made it a statute that Pharaoh should have the fifth, a predictable 20% tax, not arbitrary seizure. Third, life preservation as policy. You have saved our lives, spoke the people to Joseph. Fourth, administrative restraint. The Bible states, only the land of the priests he did not buy. Joseph reforms governance, not belief. Joseph is seen as a righteous outsider whose wisdom brings order to power. Joseph doesn't convert Egypt, he stabilizes it. Now we turn to archaeology, not to prove Joseph, but to ask, what kind of Egypt do scholars actually see emerging? Let's look at what changed first, the bureaucratic structure itself. Egyptologists note that in the early New Kingdom, administration becomes sharply centralized. Grain, labor, and land are state-managed. Record-keeping explodes. Egyptologist Barry Kemp writes that the New Kingdom used unprecedented bureaucratic control over land, produce, and labor. That description fits Genesis 47 almost line by line. Power shifts from royal micromanagement to delegated governance. According to Egyptologists, rule came to depend more on senior officials exercising royal authority than on the king's direct involvement. That is Joseph's role exactly, ruling in Pharaoh's name, with full accountability. Early New Kingdom tomb inscriptions increasingly emphasize feeding the hungry, protecting the weak, judging fairly, speaking truth. Moral self-presentation becomes a central feature of elite identity in the New Kingdom. This contrasts sharply with typical ancient Near Eastern conquest ideology and resonates strongly with Genesis ethics. The instruction of Amen Mopi tracks Jewish wisdom teachings with uncanny precision. The instruction of Amen Mopi reflects a mature ethical tradition concerned with justice, restraint, and care for the vulnerable. This is Joseph's moral world, expressed in Egyptian terms without covenant language. No inscription says Joseph. No inscription says Hebrew vizier. No inscription says 7-year famine. Egyptian royal texts are not records of internal crisis management, they are ideological monuments. Now we bring it together. The Jewish timeline places Joseph before the Exodus, during Israel's early residence in Egypt. Historically, that overlaps with the Second Intermediate Period, followed by the rise of Amenhotep I, founder of the New Kingdom, and his son Amenhotep. Archaeology at Tel el-Daba, ancient Avaris, shows a strong Semitic presence in the Eastern Delta, administrative sophistication, and alignment with the region later remembered as Goshen. The argument is not that Ahmose was Joseph's Pharaoh. The argument is this: the Egypt that crystallizes under Ahmose and Amenhotep looks exactly like the kind of Egypt Joseph would have produced. In Jewish terms, Ahmose and his son stand at the moment when Joseph's father-to-Pharaoh model becomes state DNA. By their reigns, centralized ethics-based governance isn't an innovation. It's the established system. That's what Joseph would have left behind. This is a historical, theological fit, not a sensational claim. Joseph's philosophy did not convert Egypt's theology, but archaeology shows an Egypt that learned to govern as if moral responsibility mattered. That is the influence. Not conversion, not domination. Ethical reshaping of a system. Joseph teaches us something profound. God can use exile and suffering for global blessing. Feeding nations is holy work. Joseph foreshadows a Messiah who feeds the world. And for us, you may not be called to convert systems, but you may be called to rewrite their ethics. Joseph didn't overthrow Egypt. He made it better for a time. That is what it means to be father to Pharaoh.